as you guys know, for many people who've been following this show for a long time, we were very early adopters, if not the earliest adopters, of Andrew Yang on YouTube on a large scale, as in like dedicating the show to it, right?
Please leave a comment telling you how much you love Carden so he feels better about himself.
Stop, dog, man. You are relentless today, dude. Anyway, no, come on. But wouldn't you say we're easily one of the top three? Okay. And something that I know I've said at least, and you've said on several of his arguments, such as gun control and other things, that we weren't sure how people were going to react when they started diving into the details of a lot of his ideas. There was so much fervor around the freedom dividend. Progressives loved the idea of the freedom dividend, started calling him the most progressive candidate. Some progressives, I should say. And there was a lot of interest on the libertarian and the economic Republican right, because they said, hey, we've been toying around with this idea of UBI for 4 decades, and we even passed it under the Nixon administration, and then it went nowhere. Like, this is a great idea. And so much of Andrew Yang was freedom dividend centric that very few people that liked him or were new to him were even aware of some of the details of his other plans, like his immigration plan, which seems more conservative than any Republican's immigration plan out there when you were reading a lot of these memos that we were first getting from Yang 2020. And so there's definitely been a moment now where Andrew Yang started to get some backlash on his Medicare for All. Is it true Medicare for All or not? Does it pass the Bernie test? There's all these purity tests of Medicare for All. And now everybody's Medicare for All plans are all under this wild scrutiny. We've gone from a point where the New York Post literally is lampooning the entire DNC by showing all Democrats raising their hands in support for Medicare for All on the first debate stage, while now the progressives are saying, look, nobody actually has a true Medicare for All stance out there. There was Pete Buttigieg's Medicare for All for those who want it. And then there was Kamala's Medicare for the people. And then there's Andrew Yang's, hopefully the government can outcompete the private sector. I agree with the, quote, spirit of Medicare for All. And there's all of these criticisms of everybody's, quote, M4A programs. Okay. And it's reached kind of a boiling point here now. Wouldn't you say, Cody?
I mean, honestly, I would say there was much more fervent Medicare for All talk back during the Obamacare years.
Yeah.
I'm just being honest. Because that's honestly, that's going on. We can recap that. The most recent thing, Andrew Yang was on ABC. He was on a couple networks. And on ABC, he was pressed and he said, your ad says Medicare for All. Your plan is not Medicare for All. There's not even a public option, said John Carl from ABC. Yang says, our plan is to expand a universal healthcare system to all Americans. Andrew says, adding it will happen over time. To mention that Yang's campaign outlined his plan earlier this month, saying, to be clear, I support the spirit of Medicare for All. That's one of the big things. People are saying, the spirit of Medicare for All. We can do a longer video diving into everyone's platform saying who actually has Medicare for All. But what I thought was more interesting was, and this is some data that was published a while ago, maybe 2 months ago.
Yeah.
November. What I thought was interesting about today, though, was, as you said, there's a lot of controversy over who actually has Medicare for All. I mean, I believe there's a Vice article I was reading the other day. Here we go. Yeah. And they were just talking about how even if Bernie or Warren wins on their Medicare for All plan, how do we actually get this passed? As Anonymous mentioned in our earlier video, just one person to dismiss the president. They can't just make this happen. So going through that, I was doing some research on what it is that the public opinion on Medicare for All is, because I always see interesting reporting of it. And this is, I think, one of the studies people were referencing a lot that I think is very, very interesting. So this was the big data point. And this is the Kaiser Family Foundation. It's the Kaiser Family Foundation has been tracking public opinion on the idea of a national health plan since 2017. Historically, our polls have shown support for the federal government doing more to help provide health insurance for most Americans. And they go on. This was interesting. And I don't want to get into the partisan of it, but they really do get partisan on this. They talk about the Republican and Democrat polling. I'm not saying they pick a side. I'm just saying they break it down further than that. But this is what I want to show you.
Yeah,
guys.
they're not afraid to get into the nitty gritty.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't know. I don't know. I guess I'm not one of those people who thinks that like if you're a Pokemon or a Digimon fan, that's that's a Republican or conservative fight. It's like, no, everything's not a right and left fight. Some people are just for Medicare for all and it has nothing to do with the rest of the worldview. Anyway, I'm not going to go into this crazy rant. This is what I thought was fascinating. It says the majorities think many aspects of our healthcare system would be unchanged under Medicare for all.
Yeah.
So the first thing I want to show you. Well,
they don't realize the drastic overhaul that would be.
No. But the largest thing is this is the reason what this study's showing, and the reason I want to highlight this. Sorry, I'm roundabout way of getting back to what you're talking about is Medicare for all. People are accusing Yang for using Medicare for all as a slogan. Medicare for all is literally a slogan. When you say Medicare for all to people, this is what it means. What it says, but this
can we say empty slogan?
No, because there is an idea behind it. It's not being conveyed to people in a way that actually makes sense. Judging by the fact that majority of people are split on what would actually happen. This is what I think was interesting is do you think they're asking majorities think aspects of healthcare system would be unchanged? So would taxes for most people increase? Most people do say yes, which is going to become more important in a second. They ask, do people would continue to pay deductible and copays when they use healthcare services? Most people do think yes, mostly because it just like it would like. There'd be some. Even Bernie Sanders is $200 a year, just lower, right? All U.S. residents would have health insurance coverage. Most Medicare for all plans seem to offer something along those lines. People with insurance through their current job would be able to keep their current plan. 55% think that's what it is, and people who buy their own insurance would be able to keep their own current plans. My point being is 55% of people when polled about Medicare for all assume it means you get to keep your insurance. Now, I'm not saying that every Medicare for all plan is going to abolish private insurance. But your average American's always your average American, it seems to be, is either split or largely on the idea of when I say I support Medicare for all, I'm doing so under the understanding if I get to keep my own private insurance.
Yeah, because currently right now, Medicare doesn't require that you actually abdicate the insurance that you're on. There's all kinds of supplementary Medicare programs out there. The AARP's got them. You know, all of the senior citizen programs got them.
I just want to make the point that when the Medicare for all discussion's happening, people are talking about the slogan having. There are people who push Medicare for all, and there are people who like show data like, look, everyone supports Medicare for all. But my version of Medicare for all is to eliminate private insurance, while your average American is still under the impression Medicare for all will carry with it private insurance as well.
They think it'll be currently like the Medicare system that they have and they deal with their grandparents on.
They think it's going to be, exactly, a supplement, not a replacement. The thing is, not every single Medicare for all bill that's passed or proposed either would 100% replace private insurance. That's why it gets really confusing. But that's why I thought this one was really interesting to me is how there is still so much. Like, there are people literally saying that I support Medicare for all with the understanding that Medicare for all just means my taxes go up a little bit and I get to keep my same health insurance. Your average American...
They have no idea that they're supporting a complete and total removal of their private health care.
But the thing is, sometimes that's what it means to some people, but not to others, right? Like, there's no actual firm, definite, no public option, only public... You know what I mean? So... There's one more other thing I want to get to really interesting.
Okay.
So they like your average person thinks it would lead to a reduction in doctor and hospital pay, but like I guess I don't think it's going to be too worrisome to most people. Like I said, the other thing is private health insurance companies would still be the primary way Americans get coverage. Most Americans say no, but again, the idea here is that the Medicare would emerge as a primary coverage, but not as an exclusive coverage solution. Yeah. That is still, generally speaking, what most Americans view Medicare for all as. And the way I understand some of the bills I've read, that's how a lot of the bills proposed to read. So it's interesting to me is a lot of people online, like you said, are crusading for the true Medicare for all, but it's like there's so much confusion amongst Americans in general of what this is. So this is one thing. The second data point I want to get to here.
Well, we see that in debates. That's one of the things that Pete Buttigieg got hammered for in the last debate. Remember when they tried to call him out on Medicare for all and he was like, oh, that's because I think, X, Y, or Z thing. And he got lambasted. And then he finally came out and said, I think it's Medicare for all for those that want it.
Yeah, well, and that is, by the way,
Medicare for all who want it.
That's, by the way, popular. That's the popular version. Because there's something else. Yeah. Attitudes shift after hearing messages about how Medicare for all would impact current system.
Yeah, this is the super interesting graph right here.
While there's part of it that's interesting, there's part of it that's like kind of like man bites dog or dog bites man. You know what I mean? A little bit. It's like, oh, so you're telling me people are all for free private health insurance or free public health insurance for everyone. But then as soon as you get to the implementation, everyone's immediately not for it anymore.
Yeah, the consequences.
Yeah, they're like, oh yeah, I'd love to guarantee health insurance as a right and eliminate all premiums or reduce out-of-pocket costs. Almost everyone would love for that to happen. And then people say, well, if it led to delays, would that be acceptable? No. If it threatened the current program, would that be acceptable? No. If it would require most, not even all, but most Americans to pay more in taxes, would that be acceptable? No. And if it were to eliminate private health insurance companies, would that be acceptable? No. So that's the thing that's really interesting to me about this Medicare for All. I was trying to dig into everyone's bills and policies, but I was like, hold on a minute. I want to see what and by the way, this isn't the be all end all, but this is Kaiser Permanente, a fairly large institution, one of the biggest healthcare providers in the country, I believe.
Well, isn't it? It's actually not Kaiser Permanente itself. Isn't it the Kaiser Family Foundation?
It is, but sorry, okay. I misspoke. Yeah, the Kaiser Family, like one of the largest healthcare providers in America, is polling people on this. Some good data on this stuff, and it shows that your average, and it's one of the reasons why, and this is my point I wanted to make. This right here is why Medicare for All is a slogan. It works. 71% of people want to guarantee health insurance as a right for all Americans. The only problem is barely 35 actually want to maybe go through and give up what they'd have to give up to make it a reality. So that is why it's only functioning as a slogan. The reason why Andrew Yang says it's in the spirit of Medicare for All, the reason why he is using it's always a slogan because it's only popular when it's a slogan. If you took Medicare for All as a slogan away and you just said, I want to guarantee health insurance as a right, and I want to eliminate all premiums and healthcare costs at the cost of eliminating private health insurance and requiring you to pay more in taxes, it wouldn't be popular. You couldn't even pretend it was. So it's difficult, though, because like you said, when people don't confront what isn't popular about the bill, it always starts to worry me. And I don't know, it's just why is there not as much people confronting the fact that this isn't popular as is being written by some of these candidates? And again, I'm not saying this is every Medicare for All bill is written to do all of this stuff. There's arguments that it wouldn't lead to delays, even though, there's some of the stuff I don't understand too. It always bothers me when someone comes to me with a policy proposal and they just start flat out denying any downside. It's like, well, dude, anything ever has a reaction to it. Like, that's why Bernie Sanders has no problem saying your taxes will go up because he's not lying to you. He's like, I'm not going to sit up here like Elizabeth Warren and say, well, the costs would just be so much cheaper.
Your costs will go down while your taxes go up.
Yeah, it isn't, Medicare for All isn't magic being bestowed on us by the gods. We're going to have to actually implement it, and it will take time and cost money. And I think the problem is, now, again, though, this is where I get to kind of like the dog bites man part of it.
Okay.
Yes. People love things when they're concepts that require no sacrifice and no adversity. And then as soon as you say, okay, here's the other part of it, they go, you know what? I'm not for it as much anymore. It's just, that is everything. It's one of my favorite things, Hey, you want this book? Oh yeah, cool. $10. Ah, nah, never mind, man. Like that's basically what this is, You want Medicare for All? Oh yeah, definitely. Medicare for All is great. Okay, cool. Your taxes go up, your insurance goes away. Nah, never mind. I don't want it anymore. So it's one of the reasons why I think the Medicare for All fight remains a slogan fight. It remains a fight in name alone because nobody's winning the fight and no one's winning the hearts and minds, unfortunately. They're just winning the messaging. Yeah. But this is the hearts and minds. The hearts and minds of your average American is, I don't actually know what Medicare for All really is. And when you tell me how we're going to pay for it, I actually don't like it anymore.
Yeah.
That's the reality of it.
And it's this strange thing where it's like there's no actual concrete definition that all of us can rally around to fight for or against it.
Or to help, you can't get multiple people coming together to correct them, to make it better. Because everyone has to come up with my M4A plan, but instead of having an actual, I don't know, it doesn't feel...
It's literally as though the Democratic Party's number one talking point right now is saving rock and roll. And then now, since none of us can actually define what rock and roll really is it Justin Bieber? Did it die in the 70s? Is the true god of rock and roll Led Zeppelin or X? If it's just this nebulous term where your number one slogan is we got to save rock and roll. Well, if you can't even agree on what rock and roll actually is, okay? And we're not allowing polling data from the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, you know what I'm saying, and other stuff like that. If your number one slogan is you got to save rock and roll, but you can't agree on the definition of what rock and roll is, then you're just doomed to failure.
Oh, yeah.
You're just absolutely doomed to failure because you can't even get on the same page about a definition. So if they can't get on the same page about a definition of Medicare for All, and the public definitely doesn't like any of the implementation ideas, you are literally looking at a recipe for disaster if that is your number one claim to fame. And some of the only candidates whose number one claim to fame isn't Medicare for All are Andrew Yang, Tom Steyer, ironically enough, because his number one claim to fame is impeaching Trump and climate change.
No, Andrew Yang has ran very prominently on.
Yeah, but he's most well known for Freedom Dividend.
Yeah, but he's still like he has 3 pillars of his campaign, and one of them was Medicare for all.
Hey, and why do you think I said in the very beginning when we started our show, the Medicare for all is the biggest thing that I disagree with Andrew Yang on?
Saying,
I think it's.
No, but I'm just saying Andrew Yang is also part of this. A lot of these candidates are part. of
this.
Oh
yeah, I know, and that's what I'm saying.
Pass, right?
You really need to disabuse yourself of this fantastical idea. And I remember I said when we first covered his Medicare for all platform, I said this is the most disingenuous part of his campaign. He is always forward thinking and relying upon innovation, and it seems like this is pandering. Because this does not seem Andrew Yang. And then sure enough, 4 months later now, when it's on the forefront of everybody's minds and discussion, my observations were true. It was like, look, this is going to cause you problems, bro, and it doesn't seem like you're genuinely interested. And what do you know? It's causing him problems, and he's not genuinely interested.
Well, I would say the opposite. I actually want to give Andrew Yang a lot of credit here. I want to show you. I think this sums up kind of what we were just talking about very well. So they say Yang's campaign outlined his plan earlier this month, saying, to be clear, I support the spirit of Medicare for all for adding swiftly reformatting 18% of our economy and eliminating private insurance for millions of Americans is not a realistic strategy. So we need to provide a new way forward in healthcare for all Americans. Which is like, yes, that is this quote I think sums up the Medicare debate so great in this country. This I'm confused. Your ad is explicit. Your ad says Medicare for all. Your plan is not Medicare for all. It's not even Medicare for some because in your plan there's not even a public option. And then Yang says, well, our healthcare plan would be based on Medicare and expanding it over time to more and more Americans. You'd lower the eligibility age and then you'd make it widely accessible, almost like to the point where it's for everyone. Semantically, that would be Medicare for all. But I love, like I said, you see the reaction from just there's people that are so, when you get too embroiled in it, we can't open a dictionary and read point by point, this is what Medicare for all means.
Yeah.
And you'll notice the version of Medicare for all that Andrew Yang is describing, which, by the way, no coincidence in my opinion, is basically in line with the version of Medicare for all that's popular. Andrew Yang is talking about the version of Medicare for all people actually want. I'm serious. Yeah. When asked, the version of Medicare for all people actually want is the version of Medicare for all Andrew Yang is proposing to people. Yeah. It's the version of Medicare for all that says, hey, and you know what's interesting too? By the way,
when you say people, you mean the general public that's getting polled by the KFF, the Kaiser Family Foundation, not the activist public that gets polled in all of these Democrat-only polls.
Even in those polls
that affect all of the early primaries.
Remember, like what I'm trying to say is when people hear Medicare for all, even when like they'll say 86% of people support it, but 86% of people support expanding Medicare to include more people and not eliminating private insurance. Like that's what they're thinking in their head when they hear it. It's kind of, you call it the messaging win or the messaging fail of Medicare for all, is that it means so many things to so many different people. It is difficult to have discussions on because, I mean, by the way, not even Bernie Sanders is going to get rid of all copays. I mean, there'd be like $200 a year. It'd be like nothing. Yeah. My point being that like there's so many little exceptions here and there, and will this and will that. I mean, this I thought this was interesting. So this was a report from the Physicians for a National Health Plan.org. And they did overview. This is an overview of the current Medicare for all bill, right? So they said it covers everyone in the U.S. It would cover medically necessary services, including primary and preventative care, mental health care, reproductive care, vision and dental care, prescription drugs. Also supports home and community-based long-term services. Provides full choice of any participating doctor or hospital. Provides full choice of any participating doctor or hospital. Providers may not dual practice within and outside the Medicare system. Again, you'll notice this is no takeaway of private insurance. This is even in the proposed 2019 Bernie Sanders bill, private and public are going to exist together. It seems that public option is popular, but some people are saying no public option. It's confusing. We'll do a bigger video really diving into the nuts and bolts of these. But I thought it was interesting. Like you'll notice even there's criticisms of the current Medicare for all plan as proposed by Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren signed on some other 2020 Democrats, right? There's a lot there. I think this needed to happen. We've had the national discussion on a larger public option. We need the national discussion on what actually is Medicare for all when we're talking about it. Because when it's meaning different things to different people, it's just confusing and everyone's upset all the time. Because like I said, I've seen people literally in support of someone's Medicare for all or supporting this Medicare for all bill claim there's things in here that aren't even in here. Look, even the physicians are saying, like, why does there have to be copayments? Why can't we have no copayments?
Well, yeah, and it's very dangerous because you're setting up half of the country for deep, deep, deep disappointment in something that really actually matters.
It's like people like their healthcare, right?
Yeah. I sat with my daughter all 2017 wrangling the healthcare system, fighting cancer in my daughter that wasn't even 2 years old left. You know, when your loved ones have a health issue that is life-threatening or even is just causing great amounts of stress, it is tugging at an evolutionary core that isn't an argument about water rights. You know, it's not an argument about whether or not we have a 6-foot or a 12-foot fence at the baseball field in Central Park. This isn't a political argument about whether or not we zone, you know, U3 or C3, you know, old Potter's Field that used to be an onion farm. You know what I'm saying? This is actual real life, real consequences, deep importance issues here. And we haven't even defined him yet. And it's freaking 2020, the year of the election.
Well, that's
and it's everybody's number one talking point, but none of them can even define that talking point. That is literally beyond Einstein's definition of psychosis.
Listen to this. So we'll finish it with this. This is from a Vice article. Again, this is no right-wing slander. It's from a Vice article written by Harry Cheadle. So, but as important as those fundamental questions are, if the media and the candidates are going to spend a lot of time on healthcare, it seems like there should be other topics on the table. Debate moderators could ask candidates not to have the same argument over M4A, but to discuss whether they would even prioritize healthcare in the first place, given the political complications. Moderators could also ask what the candidates would do if they couldn't pass their preferred healthcare plans, or what they think the president can do through executive orders to fix the U.S. health system. Yeah. Again, it would probably, and I know it sounds crazy, I'm going to sound like a psycho here, speaking about actual real things you can do and can implement in real policy and real things. And hey, if it doesn't get passed, what is your executive order functions as you understand them? That isn't good because you can't hide behind, I'm just for Medicare for all. I think that's why they won't do it, because it is a good point. More of these people need, like, I've seen Bernie Sanders, I won't say Bernie Sanders, I've just seen Bernie supporters, people signing on to that bill I just showed you. I've seen the supporters, not saying like random Twitter users, like journalists and stuff, criticizing Andrew Yang, but then I go back and I'm like, it's not even in Bernie Sanders' bill. No bill is proposing, which are criticizing Andrew Yang for not having in it. And again, we'll do a video with more specifics, but I think what the larger thing here, as this author pointed out, is can we have a discussion about where these candidates are going to prioritize healthcare? If they can't get their plan through, what are their other options? Are they thinking ahead? Are they thinking, what are my executive order privileges if my bill won't pass? If they're not thinking about this stuff, then you know what? Maybe they're just not as serious as they're trying to pretend they are, right? I don't know.
Have you ever seen the movie Interstellar?
No.
Okay, there's this robot who originally was programmed to try and be humorous, and he'd say funny things, but some of the astronauts, when they were under stress, didn't like it. So they forced the robot to actually have a light that is on when he's saying something humorous, so they know that it's just a joke, right? I almost wish, because I share your sentiment, that people forget they're voting for a president. And this is where I agree with the anonymous quote that we had earlier, that even with Andrew Yang, in my next interview that we have with him, I want to ask, how are you actually going to pass UBI? Because you're only a president. You're not an entire, 235-person congressional body.
He has answered that.
And ish. He says he's going to march over there and pressure him.
No, I mean, the idea is, I think the better question is what happens if, because I agree, the likelihood that he's elected president, but the Democrats lose the House is like 0 to none.
Okay, well, look, all I'm trying to say is that all too often the public thinks that then when they vote for a presidential candidate who has X idea, that X idea will become law and will get passed upon him getting voted. They present their arguments in a way that doesn't say, hey, look, I am running to become 1/3 of our government, and I'm going to do the best that I can in that 1/3. No, they're acting like they're all a bunch of monarchs. They're going to do what they want by fiat. And I wish there was a light that just had to go on in the debates when they're talking. And they say, yeah, well, I'm going to pass. What was the latest one they said they were going to pass? I'm going to pass paid family leave.
Well, hold on, though. I have a question.
I wish a light could go on that says, I'm sorry, that requires congressional intervention, not presidential intervention.
I have a question.
What? What's your question?
One question to wrap up here. Who elects the sorry, I blew it. So who hires these people?
The deep state.
No, we hired them.
Individuals.
We hired them. They go on TV and they promise us stuff we know they probably can't provide. But
yes, it is a problem with the people too.
We hired them.
We are responsible as a people. Absolutely.
We deserve every representative we have in this country. Unfortunately.
Yeah, but for heaven's sakes, if there's rules that say you have to say, my name is so-and-so and I approve this message, I think at this point, the American public and our politicians have so stupidified ourselves that maybe we just need a little light that shines when it says, this is a promise I cannot keep because I am not the Congress.
Yeah. Well, no, I mean, but because at the same time, I don't know. It's kind of like lawyer jokes almost. Like, how do you know when a lawyer's life and his lips are moving? It's like, hey, remember when Obama said we'd be out of Afghanistan in 2008? That was fun.
Yeah.
Like, presidents. Remember when Donald Trump said he released information about aliens? Remember he said he built a wall? Like, you say stuff when you run, and then you get elected. I think the best analogy I ever heard from this was somebody said, look, at the end of the day, when you get elected, you get walked into a room and you get sat down, and there's people in that room that were not elected and have been in Washington before you got there, and they will continue to be here after you leave, and they tell you how things are done. More or less, that is what happens. There's people. Why do you think these wars seemingly never end? It's because presidents didn't start them in the first place. The government started them internally. Internal machinations keep going. It wasn't a George Bush decree to go to war necessarily. Same way Obama didn't just decree we remain in war. I mean, it's not necessarily up to them. So I don't know. I'm saying same thing with Medicare for all. It's not necessarily up to the person who gets elected. Now, here's the thing about UBI specifically, like Andrew Yang points out, the world where Andrew Yang gets elected running on UBI, but like the House and Senate can't get together to confirm the popular thing, because the idea of things that are getting passed because they're popular and maybe not working isn't crazy. Like I think it would get through, but the larger thing is, there needs to be. I do agree. I would rather hear him say some more specifics about it, because it is part of it. It's part of getting elected to president. Is you are just the president. You sit on top of the executive branch. That's all you do. Yeah. It really is, and it is important people remember that. It's like they don't. Again, in the first term, it's kind of like how Obama got Obamacare through. Because you could say, how are you going to get Medicare for all through? Well, I'm going to win a gigantic, sweeping, dramatic election, take the House, take the Senate, take the White. Like, that is how you do it. And I would agree with Andrew Yang. I only see him get elected president in a sweeping, Democrats take the House, Democrats take the Senate. Just because people generally vote.
Isn't going to happen.
Well, they only vote down ballot. So like, there's not going to be like people who go Democrat Yang, Republican Senator, Republican Congressperson. That's not going to happen.
I don't know. I could see it. I could see it with Yang before I could see it with pretty much anybody else.
Not
in my
enough
lifetime.
to win an election. Okay.
Okay, there's definitely possible.
Not enough to win an election.
The oracle hath spoken. So anyway, let us know what you guys think in the comments below. We need your help sharing this video. Obviously, YouTube has deprioritized political speech. Therefore, if you can share this video, that would be wildly helpful. Also, make sure you follow us on Twitter at PSP Radio 1. This is Problem Solver Politics. We'll see you guys in the next video.